That time, at least at the beginning, I never thought that Pastor Tim was going to get arrested. He would probably say the exact same thing when he was saying, well, it may happen. Alex, I was really doubtful that that was going to take place. And maybe some of you resonate with that too. How on earth would that kind of thing take place in Alberta, Canada, the sort of Alamo of Canada, if you will? I was convinced that there was no way the authorities would actually go through with something like that. I didn't think they were going to do it. I thought they received so much backlash from what had happened with James Coates in Edmonton that they learned their lesson and they weren't going to actually see that materialize for the worry that something similar would happen here. And obviously, I was wrong. Obviously, I was wrong. But even when Tim was in jail the first time, I sort of had the thought process that, well, they can't keep him for long. They're going to release him in time. There's no way on earth they would keep him over a week. I was pretty confident things would get smoothed over because of the nature of his arrest, because of the nature of the events, and in turn, he was released fairly quickly after a short period, but we know he was arrested again. And that time I was especially sure that that was not going to happen, and it did. And my confidence this time was really beginning to be shaken. I think every one of us can testify that during that time we were all just eager for a piece of new information. What is going on? What is the situation for Tim? Is there any time that we know he's going to be released? And I'll never forget when I received one message in particular that was especially impactful. When I heard that it may be that Tim would be in prison for an indefinite period of time. And that was the only piece of information that we had. And I remember at that moment in particularly, I found it especially hard to remain steadfast. Especially difficult when the future seemed more bleak than it ever did before. We had no answers. It didn't look like anything was going to change. Our building was, in other words, confiscated at that time. The doors were locked. We were kind of just going week to week, right? This is that difficult blast from the past. Some of you, I know it's even remarkable to even think these sort of things happen, but they did. And I remember when I got that message that I just sort of mentally collapsed on myself. I was so uncertain. What's going to happen with the church? What's going to happen for the state of injustice in the nation of Canada? This is as bleak as it comes. And I felt my heart beginning to give in to a subtle despair that began to encroach in my life. And that was a difficult period for us, wasn't it? It was difficult to look and see that the trajectory was so bad. Now, you're all seated here at 3311 Center Street North. There's more faces in these pews than I've ever seen. It seems like the number continues to go up by the grace of God. The Lord has granted more mercies, I think, through what we experienced in that time than you and I can even properly keep track of. There's a plaque outside the front of this building dedicating this church to the glory of God. You and I are sitting in the deliverance of the Almighty. And as I sit here and I look back into the past, I find myself amazed that I could have ever had even a piece of doubt. Even just a little bit of doubt. Isn't that right? The way that God has brought about so much plenteous blessing is more than I can even imagine sometimes. And so I look back and I go, how could I have neglected some of these promises that are so true and so real? I know there's places for right lament and right despair, but truly giving up and losing hope, there's no place for that. And now, brothers and sisters, we're looking at all that God has done.